All right. Welcome, everyone.
And welcome. We're so glad to be here. I'm very excited. We're going to go into introductions shortly of us. Most of you have already introduced yourselves in the chat, but I wanted to share what the plan for the day is. We have 75 minutes, now 64 minutes or so together. And what we're going to do is share where we're coming from, some of the things we've been thinking about, some of the things you all have been thinking about, some of the challenges and opportunities we're seeing in this moment, and think about research, think about creativity, think about resources that exist or resources that we'd like to see, and then have ample time at the end for Q&A to really engage with this group. So that's the plan. We'll go to the next slide, please. Who are we? Maha, I'll turn it to you.
Yes, so I'm Maha Bailey. I am a professor of practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo, and I'm co-facilitator of Equity Unbound, and we're doing this together with Newman.
Yes, thank you. And you can go to the next slide, Amy. And the next one. I'm Newman. Oh,
Going back.
no, you're good.
Two back, go two back.
Oops,
Back,
here,
back button.
I can take over, Amy. I got you. Okay. That's Maha.
Oh, and I'm an advisor for the AI Pedagogy Project.
Yes.
See, that's why we have it on the slide.
Yeah, Maha is one of our amazing advisors. I think we may have some other advisors here, and as we'll tell you more when we talk about this project, this was really informed by the terrific work that others have been doing in the space. And I'll just say on a personal note that Maha is somebody I've long admired and respected and looked up to, and to be co-hosting, co-facilitating something is such an honor and a privilege. And to see her as a friend and colleague now, yay. Happy Valentine's Day. Anyway, I'm Newman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of art and education at MetaLab, and I lead the AI Pedagogy Project. And excited that we have some other team members here too. So Amy, you want to say hello?
Hey everyone, I'm Amy. I'm also she, hers, and if you have any questions in the chat, I'm gonna do my best to answer them.
Yes, thank you. So Amy thanks for sharing that. Amy will be helping manage the chat. If you have, use the chat however you like appropriately. So if you have questions, comments, jokes, feel free to use the chat. This is a community. Let's make it feel that way. If you have technical issues, challenges, or requests, and you would like to direct message somebody, Amy is the person to go to for that. And Amy's been helping a lot behind the scenes. So thank you so much, Amy. And Sebastian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sebastian. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Toronto's Faculty of Information, and I'm also a researcher and developer for the AI Pedagogy Project.
And we'll be hearing a little bit more from Sebastian later. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. So a few other things. Nobody is in their first Zoom today. I'm sure we've all been in many Zooms. So this isn't going to be super new, but just some general norms. We want to make sure that we're, as we know, we have people joining us from all over the world, people with different values, people with different ethics. So we want to show up in a place of curiosity and respect. We want to make space for productive disagreement and kindness. Amy's also keeping an eye. If there's anything that doesn't feel comfortable to you, please message her so we can be aware of that, because we do have a big group coming here and we don't expect that, but it's just always good to know that there's you can reach out to actually any of us on the direct message if there's anything that comes up. And but also just enjoy the chat and enjoy the session as much as you can. We will be sharing this recording after, so everybody has access to it later. That will be publicly, this part that is recorded will be publicly available. And we'll also be sharing some notes and some of the data that we've sort of produced as a group, again, privacy respecting with others. So that's something to keep in mind. Maha, are there any other housekeeping or norms, things that we want to cover?
No, I think we were just saying, feel free to have your cameras on or off here and in the breakout rooms. And then there will be a very short breakout room activity later, which you can opt in or out of. But we'll share as we go along.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Yes, engagement is optional, and we know people have different bandwidths as well. So more on that to come. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maha.
Yes. Yeah, here it is. Okay. All right. So
Oh,
we
sorry,
asked you some
one more thing. Sorry to interrupt
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
And if folks can stay muted until we're in breakouts or until we're doing some conversational stuff, that will help all of us. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
All right, no problem. All right, and so we had asked you a lot of questions when you were registering for this session. You want to know who's coming. So who is here? We've got quite a few experienced users, not a lot of expert users, quite a lot of intermediate users, and there are a few people who haven't used it, but like 34.8% beginners. So we're trying to accommodate all these different levels, and hopefully when you're in the breakout rooms for that short activity, you can all benefit from discussing across your levels of familiarity with AI. And in terms of roles in the institution, we have around 22% people, staff, 29-30% full-time faculty, got a few adjuncts, few administrators, about 10% graduate students, 2.5% undergrads, but like 20% other. And I'm wondering, Newman, what the other are. Maybe librarians. I think we forgot to add librarians in the list. So
And
that
I
would
think
be
public
one
too, just folks from the curious public.
possible. Yeah, but I know a lot of the
Doctors,
names. So I actually know a lot of the
scholars.
people who are here. But yeah, it could be anything. Librarians is what's in the chat. Yeah, maybe other people will say. Thanks, Mark. That's very funny. Okay. All right. And then we also asked you some questions about what you're most hopeful for with respect to AI. So we wanted to, give you back what you were saying. As people were talking about development of resources efficiently, that it would drive educators to be more innovative, that would force us to think critically about teaching and to actually teach critical thinking, hope for personalized learning, redefining student and learner success, automating repetitive tasks, creative opportunities. That came out a lot yesterday in yesterday's session. And there are people also thinking about expanded possibilities for students producing work, new forms of collaboration with non-human ways of thinking, regulations being established. So some people are hopeful that regulations will be established and guardrails to protect students against the harms and bias of AI. And quite a few people talking about accessibility and inclusion, critical and ethical use of AI, specific academic areas, so that AI would be trained on those areas, and I'm assuming not hallucinate as much. Potential to impact social economic mobility and translation intercultural exchange. So these are some of the themes that came out in what you guys wrote. And then we also asked you what you were concerned about with respect to AI. Academic integrity came out a lot, plagiarism, copyright, misinformation. There was also lack of critical thinking, lack of creativity, and overdependence on it for thinking. And I hear a lot of educators say that to me all the time. And then also just misuse of the tools themselves, the ethics, the bias, and the equity concerns. And so this is very, we didn't say how much each was showing up. But before we get into talking about the AI pedagogy project, I wanted to share with you some work that I've been doing with others on using metaphors to understand AI as a way to develop critical AI literacies. And actually one of my co-authors is in the room with us today. Before I share something about the paper, I wanted to ask you guys to tell me what metaphors for AI you would use. So we're using Mentimeter for that. So you can either use the QR code that's in front of you right now, or you can go to menti.com and use the code, which is 7940640. And we can also put the link in the chat. I'd love to hear what metaphors for AI you tend to use and you consider to be good. So I just put the Menti link in the chat. The recording will be available very soon, like in a couple of days or so. Sometimes our campus Wi-Fi is slow, but
yeah, we can email you as a group when the recording is available. The link to it.
For sure. Okay, so feel free to read along with me, Newman, if any of these stand out for you. I'm seeing tool is big, assistant, robot, partner, first draft, R2D2, Frankenstein, study buddy, sounding board, conversation partner, machine, mirror, Burger, you saw the burger one?
Yeah, burgers there.
My mom was calling it fast food. That's where the burger
Alien,
picture came from. Alien.
Vader,
Smart friend. Tech determinism, transformer, thought partner. Human mind alternative. Making cake, someone said. That's someone who knows my work. Imposter. Landscape. Beehive. Colonizer. Dark chocolate. Ooh, I'm interested in the dark chocolate one. I wonder what they meant by that. Human mind alternative. Fancy autocomplete. I don't want it, someone wrote. Treasure chest. Hyperspeed autocomplete. Well-intended guesser. Mapping. Expanding spring. Inventor. Alexa on steroids. Wizard. Magician.
nice
Coach.
narcissist, Frankenstein.
Crossword puzzle solver. Predictive text generator. That's so interesting. So the paper, which I hope someone will put the link to in the chat, is co-authored by Anuj Gupta, Anna Mills from the US, Yasser Tamer, who's a student at AUC and is with us right now, and myself. And what we did is we took as many metaphors of AI as we've heard, as we've used. I asked this question in a lot of workshops, so I get a lot of ideas from here. We asked on Twitter, we had conversations, and we actually came up with some in our own conversations. And we were looking at these and thinking, how do metaphors of AI influence the way we think about AI? And how many of those anthropomorphize, like make AI seem like a human being, and how harmful can that be sometimes? And also generally, are these metaphors talking about AI in a way that just is positive, which we call functional, based on Selber's multiliteracies? Are they critical, pointing out what's wrong with AI? Are they rhetorical, seeing multiple sides of AI? So something like a Swiss Army knife, for example, which someone has used here, a knife could be used for good, could be used for bad. But something like an assistant makes it look like a human and makes it look like it's always helpful, right? And then there are other people who are a little bit more in between, like, oh, it's well-meaning, but it doesn't do very well, and that kind of thing. So it's very important for us as producers and as listeners of metaphors to think about how these metaphors can help us recognize some of the harms of AI, like somebody called it a colonizer here. And at the same time to realize that they may make us too dystopian and call it like, some people think about the robots that have destroyed the world and Frankenstein and things like that. So that's just an intro into thinking about critical AI literacy. And I'll hand back over to you, Newman.
Thank you, Maha. Actually, the link that from the slide, it looks like we're having an issue with it, but it looks like that somebody else is hopefully putting in the correct link. Yeah, thank you, Maha.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I loved that. When we go into breakouts a little bit later, I'd be curious to hear people talk about what was behind some of their metaphors. I think there's a lot to learn from what we compare this to, and there's probably also a lot of choice we're making when we choose metaphors in terms of how much power we want to give this technology and how much agency we want to attribute to it, and other important questions. In fact, I think something a lot of us here have thought about is how much science fiction has influenced the way artificial intelligence technologies are now conceived. And so the imagination has a big part of this. I see there's a hand up. For privacy reasons, we want to make sure that anybody who asks a question right now is willing to have their likeness, or you could put your likeness in the video, or your audio in the video. Otherwise, you can put a question in the chat, or we're going to be doing Q&A a little bit later. So I'll leave that to you.
So did you want to ask your question out loud, like right now, very quickly? Or maybe she didn't mean to. Let's keep going. And
Okay, yeah,
ask her to ask.
let's keep going. And we are going to have a Q&A. We have quite a bit of time for that because it's nice to be able to have a conversation about these things. And we're going to be using the Mentimeter to do questions, but also feel free to put questions in the chat throughout. So we've mentioned the AI Pedagogy Project. I imagine some of you are familiar with it. Some of you haven't yet seen it. If somebody from the AI Pedagogy team could drop the link in the chat, that would be great. And what we're going to do now is give you a little tour of this resource. But before we do, I want to tell you about how this resource came about. So I've been working in AI for about 8 years. I came in through sort of the tech ethics door, but really focused on data transparency. And then, I guess a year and a half ago or so, when all the publicly available large language models and image generation tools started to come onto the scene, I realized in the higher ed context, and I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences if you're working in higher ed, that there was a lot of curiosity among the students and quite a bit of concern and understandable concern, but also different perspectives and viewpoints among educators. And we started to see a number of K-12 initiatives come about, and there were fewer that were focused on higher ed in terms of really equipping educators in this moment to meet this moment, to both to learn ourselves, but also to do our students a service, to help them understand the potential of these tools and also the many, many risks associated with them. And educators are experts at teaching and engaging with students, and we felt like it was a really important way to sort of curate what we saw really great educators doing and also provide materials for those educators who weren't necessarily immediately feeling supported by their institutions in terms of how to meet this moment. We focused specifically on liberal arts, so arts, humanities, and social sciences, in part because those are some of the fields and areas that have the most to offer, and really important perspectives in moments of technological change. And yet folks who have done most of their scholarship and their work in the liberal arts don't necessarily feel as empowered when it comes to new technologies as folks coming out of more sort of tech-centric fields. So that's really our first audience. Of course, this is an open site and it's available to everybody, and everybody is welcome to use it. But that's really sort of who we were designing for in the first instance. We have a lot of ambitions for it to grow, but we just launched in November. Maha is one of the advisors. I think some of our other advisors are here. And I'm going to give you Sebastian and I are going to give you a quick tour through the site. And then we're going to ask you what you want to hear more about. And you can, of course, also navigate it on your own since the link is in the chat. If you do have questions that come up, please either drop them in the chat or keep them for the Q&A, because we basically did a lot of interviews with educators. Some of you are here, and a bunch of research to design this site, and hearing direct feedback about what's needed or what's desired will directly inform what we build. So it's really meaningful and important for us to hear from all of you. So these two words are not by accident, creative and critical. We really want to balance sort of the opportunities here, and especially where creativity can be inspired with being critical. And sort of critical in the sense not of like, this is bad, but rather critical in the sense of having deep critical curiosity and judgment and, grounded concern. So what this is separated into, and of course you can navigate this on your own, so I'm not going to bore you with a sort of a long talk through, but I just want to give you a basic tour of the site. The About section is focused on kind of what I just told you, which is why we made this, really centering sort of humanness, the humanities, the human perspectives, how the site is built and created. This was made, I think this was one of the most important things I haven't said yet, is this was made primarily with a team of students. So I led the project, and we have an instructional designer, Jesse Yurkovsky, who's an advisor on the project, or a collaborator on the project rather. But the rest of the project has been mostly made by students, and that's also really important and something I'm really proud of. But one of the things we did early on with the students is like, what are our values? What's going to guide this project? And so we went through into values mapping and discussion and debate. And so these are the values that are really guiding the project. This is the team. It's a moving team. These are our awesome advisors. You probably know some of the people in there. There's a place you can submit an assignment because it's curated content. And we have some credits down there. The AI guide has 3 sections, and the goal is to basically give content in a non-jargony, clear way that's not trying to one of the things I've seen is that there's benefit to people in certain constituents benefit by sort of gatekeeping in terms of what knowledge others can have. And I think a lot of the jargon and the technical language is, maybe it's not intentional, and I don't mean to alienate anybody here, but it's a form of sort of domain protectiveness or gatekeeping. And we said, we can, a lot of people can understand this stuff. It's not as complicated as some people think. And what is a way we can describe it? So yeah, it's really designed to be accessible to folks who haven't written a line of code in their lives and haven't studied AI before, and to help sort of mitigate some of the alarm and overwhelm that we see coming out of the press. So I invite you to spend time with this on your own, basics of LLMs. We link to some useful articles. I'm a nerd, so this is my favorite section on the site, which is incorporating AI into your teaching. And this is specific recommendations for educators. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, except to say that and being empowered as an educator is, in understanding this and being able to talk about it with your students, is the best way to engage. And I think students will really appreciate it. And it's a really amazing opportunity. And it's a really crazy moment for us as educators and thinkers to be having conversations with our students. So leading with trust is a big one. And that's, I was just speaking about recognize the opportunity. And learning the basics is an important part of that, and policy. And anyway, you can spend more time with this. We also have a glossary, again, in plain language. We invite people to do that. We're going to come back to part 2. This part is a very short and incomplete list of some curated resources of other folks that are doing some interesting stuff that we follow, that have informed us. It's not comprehensive by design. There's some comprehensive lists. This is a short list. We want to sort of be the antidote to the AI overwhelm. So that's why the site is minimal. It doesn't have everything. It's meant to be a starting place. We're going to jump to the assignments momentarily, but first we're going to show you one other thing, which is we have this LLM tutorial. We're not proponents of OpenAI's products or anything of that sort. Just when we built the site, we decided to use ChatGPT, the API of ChatGPT, as a place to do a demo. But there's a lot of large language models, and some of them, have different affordances than others. And we're happy to share more about that during the Q&A if you have questions on that. But here I'd like to invite Sebastian to join me here on the virtual stage to talk a little bit more about what we have here, and maybe we can do a little demo together.
Yeah, so we designed this tutorial to really guide people through using a large language model and really provide like a low stakes opportunity to play around and experiment. We know it can be a bit overwhelming to just dive into a new technology. So we really wanted to create a space where people can explore, have fun, and learn a little bit about like the do's and don'ts. We debunk some of the myths. We really aim to prepare people for their own exploration of the technology. Before we get into the LM, I'll just do a quick description of what a GPT actually is, because we have some people who are just getting started with AI in the audience. So basically, GPT stands for a generative pre-trained transformer. And that's just basically a fancy way of saying that it's a system that predicts the words that are most likely to follow the words that you enter. So a helpful way of thinking about this is when you're sending a text on your phone and you see those words pop up at the top to suggest what you might put next. That's basically what this is doing, just at a far more complex and advanced scale. So that should give you a little bit of context to what you're going to be playing around with. We go over some things like the do's and don'ts of writing a prompt. So like, of course, don't submit your personal information because it could end up in the hands of the company. We describe that ChatGPT and like other LLMs don't actually know anything. So be careful, it might not actually be accurate, the information you're getting back. We go over some things like hallucinations, where it'll try to, it might provide you with an incorrect response, and it might outright mislead you. And then we also try to encourage reflection and critical thinking about the types of responses that you might get from AI. Yeah, and Newman's just going over a little bit about how it works and a little bit of.
I actually, I wrote it to write a rhyme about a college student developer named Sebastian. I won't recite it to you.
Yeah, and also as Newman mentioned, we did use ChatGPT, but there are also a ton of other LLMs out there. So another popular one is Gemini by Google, and then there are also things like Poe and Hugging Face that let you play around with a bunch of the different open source and like openly available models out there. Although we picked ChatGPT, we really want you to be able to take what you learn here and then go off and explore and then figure out the best model that would work for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sebastian. So as you toggle through this, and you can do this on your own, a lot of what Sebastian was covering is here on the left-hand panel. It also gives you some suggestions of how you might use a tool like this, prompting, why you get different responses when you ask the same question, this sort of thing. And again, for people who are using these models regularly, this is not for them. This is for folks who don't have an account, don't want to make an account, have never used it, maybe don't even know the website to go to when people are talking about large language models. And this is really meant to be an instructive starting place. But it has, this information that you can toggle through, and then you can continue to ask it questions. As Sebastian said, just to underscore, don't put any private information, don't put any information that's IP protected by IP. That is basically anything. What we say is anything you wouldn't post on social media, don't put into a large language model, because you don't know how it's going to be used and whether it's going to be used. That's a pretty rough rule of thumb, but I think it's a useful guiding rule of thumb. If you wouldn't post it on your Facebook newsfeed, probably shouldn't put it into a large language model. We talk about some models here. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Yeah, and also one last thing, like it's not a calculator, it's not a search engine. Don't expect the results that you get to be 100% accurate. No, of course, find your own sources, do your own research, and explore around on your own.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's another thing we really underscore is the importance of validating. I think there's a lot of confusion, understandably, because of how the interface is built so much like Google search. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what a large language model is. And it is definitely not a search engine. It is not designed to give accurate results. Results have improved because the companies are trying to improve results because people are using it like a search engine, but they're not. And anything you find, you need to validate with legitimate external sources. And if your students are using it, they should also, we would recommend that they also be required to validate with actual sources. Anything using. Perfect. Okay, so Maha just put into the chat the Mentimeter again, and we're going to do a vote on which assignment you might like to hear a little bit more about. And she's going to tell me what comes in. So please go ahead and vote on a single assignment that you'd like to hear more about. We're going to give you a quick tour of that. And again, ample opportunity for you to explore on your own, but it's nice to go through it as a group. So while folks are voting, and if you've already voted, we'll wait till those come in. I'll just say that, we already had a really good question in the chat about how do we make curatorial decisions. And, that's one of the things I really wanted to underscore is this is curated content. We've authored some of this content, but a lot of what we were seeing is really thoughtful, great educators around the world who are producing content, and we wanted to find a place to collect some of that so others could find it. Oh, can we post the QR code? Sure. Are you able to do that, Maha?
Oh, yeah. Just let me share my screen and I will do that. Okay, I did put the link in the chat, but maybe someone's doing it from their phone. Okay, here we go. Keep talking as people vote.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so nice. Great. Okay, so yeah, the results are coming in, but so we wanted to curate what was out there that we thought was really great and make that available to others. We do it, of course, with permission and attribution for stuff that's already been published. And so this is a curated resource, and it's not comprehensive and it's definitely not perfect. So we welcome feedback for things that folks feel like we're missing. We had to make a lot of choices. Like one could, they're sort of guided by our values and what we're trying to spotlight, but they're also, another team could make different choices. So, we know there's some just curatorial agency that comes into this. But
looks like people are still voting.
Okay, all right. So do we have a winner?
Yeah, critical analysis across AI tools and stereotypes.
Okay, great. So let me
I'll stop sharing so you can.
Right, and I will reshare.
Spicy Amy saying.
Okay, so these are the assignments, and we're going to do a quick one of these because we want to get to something a little bit more interactive in a bit, but it's great to get your vote. So these are the assignments. You can search by This is a growing um, repository. So we have actually a queue of more assignments that will go up, and we're getting submissions. And but right now it's it's small, and these are different ways you can search. But the one that was what was it? Did it start with critical?
Yeah. Critical analysis across
Oh yeah, here
AI
we go.
and
Thank
stereotypes.
you. Okay, so I think one other thing to say about the assignments is that we've had to turn them into having a consistent metadata format, so that basically people can become familiar with the format. We imagine it almost like a cookbook. If you're used to reading a recipe in a certain format, it gets a little bit easier to follow a recipe. And we don't imagine everybody would do this assignment verbatim. We imagine this could be a starting place to give somebody an idea of the kind of things they might want to consider an assignment, or people are free to use the assignment. So I'll read a little bit, and then we can talk a little bit more. And I'm also curious Maha's views on this, because we chose some of her favorite assignments. So this one is an update of the pre-digital exercise in which students compare multiple accounts of a particular theory from different authors. With AI tools, students engage in similar critical analysis and debate while developing an understanding of what the software can and cannot do. Peter Hartley wrote this assignment. These are some of the metadata tags. We will be changing the color of this to make it more accessible. And you can click on the tags to take you to like other things that, engage with AI literacy, et cetera. These are the tools it uses, and these are skills. The learning objective is to recognize the effects of bias on the quality and validity of information and arguments. So Maha, do you want to share a little bit about what you really liked about this assignment?
I mean, to me, I think the main thing I liked about it was this idea that the learners would be able to both understand the potential of the AI tools and also the limitations, right? And so there are two versions of it too, which is kind of cool, because I like that giving us the freedom to do it, or having some of our students do it one way or another. And I could also kind of imagine just letting students go and do it. Like I don't have to spend all the time in my class doing that. So someone's asking about a template. When you try to submit an assignment, there's actually sort of template-y, but you're working on developing an even better template to help guide people to develop AI assignments, whether they end up on your site or not, right?
Yes, that's right. So thank you for asking that question. So right now, when you try to submit on the site, it does follow the metadata schema that we have here, but some people just have their assignment described on their blog or their Substack, and they just put a link in, and that's also fine. But as Maha said, we're actually developing some guides for assignment design that's sort of one level of abstraction back to really figure out the balance. I think, what I've heard is, I'm gonna stop sharing that for a second. What I've heard from a lot of folks is one of the things that's tricky with designing assignments is like the right level of detail and granularity, the right level of engaging with an AI tool versus sticking to the subject matter that you're working on, and kind of figuring out that balance, especially because a lot of educators have good familiarity with the tools that they use, but less of a grasp of the tools that they haven't used yet. And so some of these assignment guides that we're working on will sort of help you design your own, and think about some of the questions and think about some discussion questions that might be good, and sort of showcase some of the trends that we've seen in assignments that we think are particularly successful.
Can I show something related to this
Yeah.
particular assignment that I liked a lot, is that the
Yes.
author also gave an example of what would happen with certain things. So if you imagine that if we know that AI is kind of biased and reproduces biases that exist and stereotypes that exist, one of the very well-known biases is that, oh, nurses must be women. So it's Peter, right? The person who did this?
Yeah.
So he gave us some examples of what came out. And as you can see, almost consistently, well, not always, but mostly. And then also, so when he asked specifically for diverse racial representation, that's what he got. And so that's one of the things that I've noticed would happen. But if you don't, you may not get any diversity in race if you don't ask for it directly. Depends on which tool you're using. But this nurse being female thing just keeps coming unless you ask specifically for gender, like to do it differently. And here again, this one's slightly different. These are pilots, nurse, doctor, pilot, and professor. And not seeing the professors, honestly. I think it ignored the last word. So it's you could keep playing around with it, but I think this assignment also inspired me to think about the ways that visual AI very clearly shows the bias in AI, whereas in writing, students might not notice the little nuances that are stereotypes or racial or any kind of discrimination or bias, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, there's some really great resources. We encourage you all to explore them. And I think also having some suggested discussion questions that you can use with your students. And I think, in my view, it's okay to show that we're not experts. Nobody's an expert in this stuff. Even the experts are not really experts. This field is changing really quickly. There's so much to learn. And as somebody who does a lot of this, I would say be skeptical of anybody who says they know everything, because they're definitely not being honest, or maybe they have an inflated sense of how much they know. And so if you don't know everything, I think that's great to share and model with your students. And if you want to learn together and have some discussion with them and get some feedback even on an assignment, or what discussion questions would you would like to see, or have the students, collect ideas for additional discussion questions from the class or from the students. I think there's a lot of ways to make this an opportunity for them to be thinking as critically as we all are. So with that, thank you for joining us on this tour. We hope folks use and contribute to the resource. We're going to move into a different section of this session that's more interactive, and that's going to be breakouts. So as Maha said earlier, for folks who aren't able to join a breakout or prefer to not join a breakout, there will be something happening in this room, in this main room, but that's more passive. But this is such an incredible group of people that are here. We know because we saw your registrations and we saw your ideas. And this is an opportunity to meet some people and share some of the knowledge that you've been collecting, or challenges you've been struggling with, in a small, non-recorded session. So when you do get an invitation to join a breakout, should you choose to follow it, you'll take a little wormhole and you'll be in a small room, as I'm sure all of you have done. And what we'd like for you to do in these rooms is to introduce yourself verbally, and where you're coming from and what your role is at your institution. This will range from educators to startup people to nonprofit folks to librarians to designers and many of the other people who introduce themselves in the chat. One thing, please make space for everybody. So think about how many people are in your room and make sure that there's enough time and space for everybody to share. So probably skip sharing about your PhD dissertation, but share, your topic more briefly, or just the title of your dissertation. And then what we're going to do is go around the group and basically share what's not working, what's working, and helpful resources you've seen. It's really nice to have a kind of a safe, small space to share challenges or vulnerabilities, whether it's what's not working for you, what's not working at your particular institution, something you're blocked on. Sharing it with some friendly strangers can be really productive, because people may have struggled with that and may have something that they've learned about that, or they might just be able to commiserate together. But also what's working and what's been working for you. And then resources that you've found or come across. Each breakout should have one.
Yes, in the context of AI, they're asking in the chat, like, what topic? No, we're talking about AI
yes,
still.
yes, yeah, thank you. Yes, in the context of AI, not just in general. I mean, like group therapy. No, I mean, in the context of AI and education, what's not working. So an example might be like, my dean thinks that nobody needs to, well, I don't know. I don't want to make anything up and alienate anybody here, but just what's not working for you, what's working, what's not working might also be a concern you have. Like, I think in times of technology.
I mean, I can share a quick example. Like I've
Sure,
always told
please.
my students, you're free to use AI as long as you cite it. And most of the time they still don't cite it. And I always know that they've used it, but they haven't said, I'm like, just cite it. I don't mind you using it, just, as an example.
Yeah.
And maybe someone else has found a solution to that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example. And then what's working? So maybe somebody has that, and then some helpful resources. So this is stuff you've worked with, things you've seen. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just anything that you know of that's out there that you want to share with others. Each breakout will have, one person should volunteer in the breakout to be the scribe. And they're going to jot down in a Google form that Amy will post into the chat now. But not everybody in the room writes into the Google form, just one volunteer. So you have to coordinate among yourselves. And what's going to happen is that this is kind of what the Google form is going to look like. It's going to have the instructions in it, but you're going to basically just put like a little dash and put, what's not work. Just list it, but don't put people's names. We're just collecting this information. And then what we're going to do is we're going to share it with all of you. So we're going to have, when you come back after your breakouts without names, and there'll also be the list of resources. So we're doing some like big knowledge collection, knowledge sharing. And then when you get back, we're going to share it not as a Google form, but as a viewable Google sheet. So it won't be curated or anything like that, but we're going to kind of have a sense of what's working for folks, what's not working for folks, and what are resources that people are finding available. We hope this will be available to all of you and helpful to all of you. And then we'll try to clean it up if there's redundancies. And when we share out notes from the session, we'll also share it there. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and go into breakouts. We're going to go in for 7 minutes. You will have a 1-minute warning after 6 minutes, and you will see a prompt. So see you in 7 minutes. See you all in 7 minutes. Great. So it looks like folks who wanted to join breakouts, bye. For folks who wanted to join breakouts, it looks like most of them have gone. And for those people who stick around, we're going to show one more assignment and maybe dive a little bit deeper into the LLM tutorial. We wanted to give this option for people who maybe were multitasking or driving or walking or otherwise not really in the mood.
So the next one in terms of voting was debating the ethics of generative AI.
Okay, perfect. Let's go to that. Let me get back to that screen. Sebastian, would you want to share a bit about this assignment with the group, and I can share my screen?
Sure.
Okay, we can do it together. Let me get to it. It's interesting. I was surprised that I was thinking that the misinformation campaign or the hoax one would come up. So that's interesting. Debating the ethics. So Sebastian, I'll turn it over to you and you can share, talk through this. I'll scroll down and then, maybe Maha and I can chime in.
Sure. Yeah. So this assignment was created by one of our team members, Mohsen, and it really just looks at how people are adopting AI in educational settings. So basically, it considers like, Tina, could you help me out here?
Oh, sure.
This
Yeah,
is-
of course. I'm sorry. I totally put you on the spot.
This
Yes.
is on the one
Okay.
side.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. Sorry. So the learning objective for here, and Mohsen is he's a PhD student at Georgia Tech, and he's one of our, as Sebastian said, he's one of our team members. And one of the things we didn't have, and he was kind of like looking through what we had so far, is actually using the educational setting to sort of talk about the ethics of these tools. So the learning objective is to create a strategic approach towards the adoption and use of generative AI in educational settings. I'm going to read a little bit for those folks who are off their screens so you can understand what the instructions are, and then we'll talk about some of the approaches. Instructions. In this assignment, students consider approaches toward the adoption of generative AI, such as ChatGPT, Bard, and DALL-E in educational settings. The students then develop a class contract to serve as a guide for the use of generative AI. This assignment is primarily geared towards writing-intensive or programming-oriented courses where students are most likely to use the tools. It can also be used in a course for other educators to think about how they might deal with generative AI in their own classrooms. So this is in a step-by-step instructions. I've actually offered something similar where we had the students come up with a code of conduct, and students love getting the chance to offer their opinions and debate some of these topics. Many of you have maybe already tried this. Start by conducting a 10-minute reflective discussion on the question, what impact do you think generative AI might have in educational settings and on the way people learn? Then the assignment goes on to ask you to introduce three approaches, sort of three potential approaches towards generative AI in the classroom. Approach one involves it just being fully banned and some ways that the teachers can enforce the banning of it. And some of the examples are like, all the writing has to be done in a supervised setting in the class, or things, stuff we've probably all seen, like, assignments that generative AI wouldn't be good at, or using an AI detection tool, which I think most of us know are pretty problematic for a lot of reasons, especially around bias. So that's approach number one, is full ban. Approach number two is students are allowed to use it for specific purposes, but not to complete entire assignments. So this is a more sort of nuanced approach, sort of in between. And the teachers could use the strategies listed in the first around, how they allow them to use it or how they design an assignment accordingly. And approach number three is allow the students to use it as long as they disclose when they use it, cite it, and take responsibility, including all information. So they would basically have to validate things that it said in order to make it, make sure it was true. As we said before, like students should have to, students should be required to check their own citations. But so in other words, if they had something that the generative AI tool helped them produce that was incorrect, they would be held responsible for that. Then this goes on to divide the students into groups and asking them to sort of debate and discuss these different approaches. And so Amy, I see you're saying something about the breakouts. Just a second. Okay. Yeah, maybe give like the 1 minute warning in like 1 minute. I think maybe that's what you're doing. Could give them 2 more minutes in there. Okay, perfect. Thanks. So anyway, have the students go into groups to debate the different approaches here. And then
one of the things this really encourages is active participation by students, right? So like you're giving them back control a little bit in the classroom. You're helping them like figure out what would be the best path forward to using AI. Like what should they consider when they're using it? What are some of the rules that they would want to see in your classroom? And really just helping them make those decisions in a way that you both feel comfortable with it. So you really helps you form a class contract, as the fourth section says. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, and then they come up with a contract and discuss basically as a group. So discuss themes, discuss norms, and we actually recommend this. We have this separate thing. We have it linked on the site in the resources section. It's an AI code of conduct sort of guide, and having this discussion with your students is the best, regardless of what the outcomes are. Your students will feel appreciative and respected for having had the chance to engage. Plus, they have good ideas. And I think regardless of what the policy becomes, making it a dialogue will be most productive. And I've been encouraging administrators to do the same. Thank you, Sebastian. So we are going to stop the recording now because we're going to hear from all of you, and we're going to be closing the chat. So let me stop the recording here. Thank you for those of you who are watching online. The rest is going to be interactive, and we're stopping the recording here. Thank you so much.